Life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Forrest Gump wasn't just a heartwarming tale about an unlikely hero. It was a production nightmare that nearly collapsed under its own ambition, where Tom Hanks learned his accent from a child actor, where explosive stunts put lives at risk, and where the studio was convinced they had a complete disaster on their hands. Picture this: a $55 million gamble that no one wanted to make. A leading man who wasn't the first, second, or even third choice. A running sequence that became so culturally iconic it inspired real-life pilgrimages across America. Behind every tear-jerking moment, a chaotic production filled with accidents, creative battles, and technological breakthroughs that would change cinema forever. Today, we're diving deep into 20 weird facts about Forrest Gump that'll make you see this beloved classic in a completely different light. But wait until you hear the bonus fact at the end. It involves a famous director's completely different vision that would have turned this movie into something unrecognizable. Let's run into the madness of Forrest Gump. Tom Hanks wasn't even close to being the first choice. When the producers first started casting Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks's name wasn't anywhere near the top of their list. John Travolta was the first actor the producers had in mind for the role of Forrest Gump, but the actor would go on to do Pulp Fiction instead. The irony: Travolta would later call passing on Forrest Gump one of his biggest career regrets. But it wasn't just Travolta. Bill Murray and Chevy Chase were also sought for the part, but they both turned it down. Can you imagine Bill Murray delivering "Life is like a box of chocolates" with his signature deadpan delivery? The entire tone of the movie would have shifted into something completely different. What seems like perfect casting now was actually the result of multiple rejections that forced the studio to think outside its comfort zone. Tom Hanks learned his accent from a child. Here's where the production gets genuinely weird. Humphrey's thick Mississippi accent was reportedly one of the key reasons the casting team and producers made their decision to cast young Michael Connor Humphreys as young Forrest. But then Zemeckis faced an unusual problem. How do you make a seasoned actor like Tom Hanks sound like an 8-year-old from Mississippi? The solution was unprecedented. Instead of coaching the child to match Hanks, they did the reverse. Tom Hanks spent weeks studying Humphreys' speech patterns, intonation, and distinctive drawl. Picture one of Hollywood's most established actors sitting in a trailer, listening to recordings of a child's voice over and over, practicing until he could replicate it perfectly. The result created an eerie continuity that made audiences believe they were watching the same person age naturally on screen. Sally Field was only 10 years older than her son. The casting department created one of cinema's most convincing mother-son relationships through pure movie magic and age-defying makeup. Field is only 10 years older than Hanks, making their family dynamic a masterclass in illusion. What audiences didn't know was that Field and Hanks played contemporaries and love interests in the 80s romantic comedies. The transformation required hours in the makeup chair daily. Field endured extensive prosthetics, age spot applications, and posture coaching to embody a woman old enough to be Hanks's mother. Between takes, the illusion would shatter as Field and Hanks would joke about their previous romantic scenes together. The crew often had to remind themselves that this wasn't actually a family relationship when the cameras stopped rolling. The running scenes nearly killed the production budget. Those iconic cross-country running sequences that define Forrest Gump weren't just logistically challenging, they almost bankrupted the production. The crew had to secure permits across multiple states, coordinate with local authorities, and transport equipment across thousands of miles. What started as a simple montage concept evolved into one of the most expensive sequences in the film. The production team faced unexpected disasters at every turn: weather delays in Monument Valley, equipment failures in the desert, local protests in small towns where filming disrupted daily life. Tom Hanks developed severe blisters and dehydration during the desert sequences. The insurance costs alone for the running scenes exceeded the budget for most independent films. Yet these sequences became so culturally powerful that they inspired real fans to recreate Forrest's cross-country journey. The ping pong balls were completely digital. Every single ping pong ball you see in the movie is a computer-generated effect. This was 1994 when CGI was still in its infancy, making this achievement revolutionary. Tom Hanks spent days hitting absolutely nothing with his paddle, relying entirely on timing and imagination to create his performance. The technical crew had to invent new software to track the paddle movements and calculate realistic ball physics. Each ping-pong sequence required weeks of post-production work. What looks effortless on screen was actually Hanks demonstrating incredible acting skill, convincing audiences he was engaged in intense matches against invisible opponents. The technology developed for these scenes would later influence how CGI objects interact with real actors in modern filmmaking. The Vietnam War explosions put lives at risk. In one Vietnam War scene, Gump carries Bubba away from an incoming napalm attack. To create the effect, stunt actors were initially used for compositing purposes. Then, Hanks and Williamson were filmed, with Williamson supported by a cable wire as Hanks ran with him. But the real story is more dangerous than audiences realized. When the two men are seen furthest back in the shot, they are actually two stunt people, running in front of a barrier to protect them from the explosions that were occurring. The explosive charges were so powerful that debris flew beyond the safety barriers. One stunt performer suffered minor burns when a piece of burning material landed on his costume. The crew had to halt filming for 2 days while safety protocols were completely redesigned. What appears as seamless action on screen masks, genuine life-threatening moments behind the cameras. The feather opening wasn't real either. The iconic opening shot of the feather floating through Savannah wasn't the poetic accident it appears to be. The entire sequence was digitally created, with the feather's path plotted by computer programmers rather than natural wind currents. The production team spent over a month perfecting the feather's trajectory, ensuring it would land precisely at Tom Hanks's feet. Multiple real feathers were tested during pre-production, but none behaved predictably enough for filming. Wind machines, wire rigs, and even small fans hidden throughout the set couldn't create the graceful, dreamlike movement Zemeckis envisioned. The digital solution required pioneering techniques that would become standard in modern filmmaking. That opening feather represents thousands of hours of programming and rendering time, all to create one perfect moment of cinematic poetry. Jenny's apartment was built inside a gym. Robin Wright's scenes in Jenny's rundown apartment were filmed inside a converted gymnasium in South Carolina. The production couldn't find a real location that matched Zemeckis' vision of urban decay, so they constructed an elaborate set that could be controlled for lighting and sound. The set decorators went to extraordinary lengths to create authentic squalor. They aged the walls with coffee grounds and tea stains. Real mold was cultivated on bathroom tiles. The smell inside the gym became so overwhelming that crew members had to take regular breaks outside for fresh air. Wright later revealed that the realistic decay made it emotionally difficult to inhabit the character's headspace. The physical environment genuinely affected her performance, creating authentic desperation that can't be faked. The protest speech that nobody heard. When Forrest Gump appears at a protest march against the Vietnam War to speak to the crowds, the microphone accidentally gets unplugged and no one can hear what Forrest is saying. Audiences were left to wonder what he said because we didn't even get to hear his speech. But the reason behind this creative choice reveals a deeper production controversy. Tom Hanks actually did deliver a complete speech during filming. However, the content was so politically charged that test audiences reacted negatively, regardless of which side of the political spectrum they represented. Rather than risk alienating viewers, Zemeckis made the brilliant decision to cut the audio entirely. The mystery became more powerful than any actual words could have been. Hanks's speech remains one of cinema's most famous, unheard moments. The chocolate scene required 300 takes. Before we dive deeper into this production madness, go ahead and like and subscribe because the behind-the-scenes chaos we're about to explore gets absolutely insane. And you won't want to miss how this seemingly simple movie nearly destroyed everyone involved. The famous "Life is like a box of chocolates" scene required over 300 takes to achieve, not because Tom Hanks couldn't deliver the line, but because the production team couldn't control the background elements. Every time Hanks nailed his performance, a car would drive by at the wrong moment, a bird would fly into frame, or the lighting would shift due to changing clouds. The bench itself became a character in the production. Located in Savannah's Chippewa Square, it drew curious crowds throughout filming. Security had to create barriers blocks away to prevent tourists from wandering into the shots. The bench was eventually removed and placed in the Savannah History Museum, but not before hundreds of fans had carved their initials into its surface. What appears as a quiet, contemplative moment on screen masked weeks of logistical nightmares. Barry Sonnenfeld almost directed it as a dark comedy. Barry Sonnenfeld was also considered, but he chose to do Addams Family Values instead. But Sonnenfeld's vision for Forrest Gump would have created an entirely different movie. His treatment approached the material as a dark, satirical comedy, emphasizing the absurdity of Forrest's incredible luck rather than the heartwarming sincerity. Sonnenfeld wanted to cast Steve Martin as Forrest, imagining the character as more aware of his unusual circumstances. The tone would have shifted from gentle inspiration to biting social commentary. Test readings of Sonnenfeld's script featured more explicit political humor and cynical observations about American culture. The movie we know and love almost became a completely different genre, proving how directorial vision shapes every aspect of storytelling. The shrimp boat scenes nearly sank the production. The shrimp boat sequences presented massive technical challenges that almost ended filming permanently. The production team had to coordinate with the Coast Guard, manage unpredictable weather, and work around actual commercial fishing operations. The boat used for filming developed a serious leak during one of the storm sequences, forcing an emergency evacuation. Tom Hanks and the crew found themselves genuinely stranded when their rescue boat also experienced engine failure. For 4 hours, they drifted in the Atlantic while Coast Guard helicopters searched for their location. The terror in Hanks's eyes during the storm scenes contains genuine fear. He wasn't sure they would make it back to shore safely. What appears as movie magic was actually a near disaster that could have ended the production permanently. The famous bench doesn't exist anymore. The bench where Forrest tells his life story was specifically constructed for the movie and placed temporarily in Savannah's Chippewa Square. After filming wrapped, the bench was removed for preservation, but not before creating a tourism boom that fundamentally changed the city. Thousands of visitors still arrive daily, searching for the bench location. Local businesses capitalized on the phenomenon, creating replica benches and tours that promised to show the real Forrest Gump locations. The city had to install permanent plaques explaining that the bench was a movie prop, but fans continue to sit in the square hoping to recreate the movie's magic. The fictional bench became more culturally significant than many real historical landmarks. Robin Wright was almost replaced halfway through filming. Robin Wright's performance as Jenny underwent significant evolution during production, creating tension between her interpretation and Zemeckis' vision. Early dailies showed Wright playing Jenny with more hardness and cynicism than the script required. Studio executives began discussions about a potential replacement, fearing audiences wouldn't sympathize with her character. The breakthrough came during an emotional scene where Wright broke down between takes, overwhelmed by Jenny's tragic trajectory. Zemeckis realized that Wright's instinctive protection of the character was actually deeper than the script suggested. Instead of replacing her, he encouraged Wright to lean into her emotional interpretation. The performance that seemed wrong during early filming became the heart of the movie's emotional impact. The presidential meeting scenes used groundbreaking technology. The sequences showing Forrest meeting various presidents required technology that barely existed in 1994. Director Robert Zemeckis used computer-generated effects to insert Forrest into historical scenes, including meetings with presidents and celebrities. Each presidential scene required months of preparation and post-production work. The technical team had to study archival footage frame by frame, matching lighting conditions, camera angles, and film grain. Tom Hanks performed his scenes against green screens, reacting to tennis balls positioned where presidential faces would later appear. The lip-syncing technology required to make it appear that presidents were responding to Forrest's comments was so advanced that government agencies contacted the production team to understand their methods. These scenes pioneered techniques that would become standard in modern filmmaking. The AIDS storyline almost didn't make it into the movie. Jenny's death from AIDS-related complications was one of the most controversial elements during production. Test audiences reacted strongly against the storyline, with some viewers feeling it was too depressing for the movie's optimistic tone. Studio executives pushed for Jenny to die from a different cause or to survive entirely. Zemeckis fought to maintain the AIDS storyline, arguing that ignoring the epidemic would be historically dishonest. The compromise involved subtle references rather than explicit medical details. A planned sequel would have revealed that Forrest's son also contracted HIV, but the project was ultimately abandoned due to sensitivity concerns. The AIDS storyline became a crucial element that prevented the movie from becoming overly sentimental. The running scene followers created a real movement. The cross-country running sequence inspired hundreds of real people to attempt similar journeys. Within months of the movie's release, police departments across the country reported increased incidents of people attempting to run across state lines without proper preparation or support. Several runners required emergency rescue after becoming lost or dehydrated in remote areas. The phenomenon became so concerning that the film's producers issued public safety warnings. Yet the positive impact was equally significant. Running clubs formed specifically to recreate Forrest's route, raising millions for charity. The fictional running scene created a real-world movement that continues today, with organized Forrest Gump runs happening annually across multiple states. Tom Hanks paid for the running scenes himself. When production costs for the running sequences began spiraling out of control, Tom Hanks made an unprecedented decision. He personally funded several days of filming for the cross-country scenes, using his own salary to ensure the sequences could be completed as envisioned. This financial investment gave Hanks additional creative control over how the running scenes were shot and edited. He insisted on practical locations rather than studio work, believing the authentic landscapes were crucial to the movie's emotional impact. Hanks's financial commitment demonstrated his belief in the project when studio executives were losing confidence. His personal investment literally saved some of the movie's most iconic moments. The movie was shot in chronological order. Unlike most films, Forrest Gump was shot almost entirely in chronological order, allowing the actors to naturally develop their characters' emotional arcs. This unusual approach created logistical nightmares for the production team, who had to coordinate locations, weather, and actor availability in precise sequence. The chronological filming allowed Tom Hanks to gradually develop Forrest's physicality and speech patterns throughout production. His performance in later scenes genuinely reflects months of living with the character. However, this approach also meant that any major problems early in production would cascade through the entire filming schedule.
They played mother and son,
When weather
helped
delays
make the
pushed
age
the
gap
Vietnam
feel wider
sequences
than it
behind
was.
schedule,
Still, it's
it
one of those
affected
movie
every
facts that makes
subsequent
people
scene in the
smile once
movie.
they discover
The
it.
soundtrack's
It demonstrates
success was
the power of
completely
good
unexpected.
acting.
The movie
One of the
used
most
a
famous
greatest
scenes in
hits
Forrest Gump was the
soundtrack
one
to
where he
evoke a
held a
sense
box
of
of
time
chocolates
and
and said,
place,
"You
but
never
the
know what you're going to
soundtrack's
get."
massive
But now it
commercial
is part of
success
film history.
surprised everyone
Getting
involved.
caught in the
The
rain
production
and
team
running
had
through
secured
gunfire.
relatively
Everything looked so
inexpensive
realistic that
licensing
many
deals
people
for
believed
classic
that after
songs,
filming ended,
expecting
the team
limited
added the
commercial
mountains lake.
release.
It looked so
When the
real that
soundtrack
almost
became
no
a
one could tell the
multi-platinum
difference.
success,
Every
it
time
sparked
Forrest's
legal
age
disputes
changed in the
over
film,
royalty agreements. Several artists filed lawsuits claiming they had been misled about the movie's commercial potential. The soundtrack's success influenced how movies approach music licensing, with studios now assuming all soundtracks could become major commercial products. What began as a simple period atmosphere became a blueprint for movie soundtrack marketing. Bonus fact: Terry Gilliam turned down a chance to direct the film, and his vision would have created something unrecognizable. Gilliam envisioned Forrest Gump as a surreal, dystopian commentary on American mythology, similar to his work on Brazil and 12 Monkeys. Gilliam's treatment featured dream sequences, time distortions, and questioning whether Forrest's adventures were reality or delusion. He wanted to cast Gary Oldman as a more neurotic, unreliable narrator version of Forrest. The movie would have been filmed in black and white with bursts of color during fantastical sequences. Gilliam's Forrest Gump would have been a mind-bending art film rather than a heartwarming crowd pleaser. The contrast between Gilliam's vision and the final product shows how different directors can transform identical source material into completely different experiences. 30 years later, Forrest Gump remains a testament to how chaotic productions can create unexpected masterpieces. Behind every beloved moment lies a story of creative struggles, technical innovations, and human drama that rivals anything shown on screen. The movie that no studio wanted to make became a cultural phenomenon that continues to influence both filmmaking and popular culture. If you enjoy discovering the madness behind this classic, make sure to like and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes secrets that'll change how you watch your favorite movies. Because, like Forrest always said, you never know what you're gonna get, but sometimes the journey is more incredible than the destination.